Cloud adoption is ramping up, but prevention-based security isn't enough for the hybrid attack surface. That's why Gartner predicts that 60% of enterprise security budgets will go towards detection and response in 2020. ExtraHop Reveal X Cloud delivers cloud-native network detection and response for the hybrid enterprise, the only SaaS-based NDR solution for AWS. Request a 30-day free trial of Reveal X Cloud at extrahop.com/trial. That's extrahop.com/trial. Keep your company and products relevant, competitive, and reliable by standardizing your security framework to protect intellectual property, become a reliable business partner, and guard financial and customer information. Standards Connect is an online standards management solution from ANSI. It's Standards Access Simplified. Standards Connect is a cost-saving, fully customizable solution for entrepreneurs and companies that spend $2,000 or more per year on standards and want to translate spend into a subscription model, want to simplify access, search, monitoring, and collaboration, or need a centralized hub of standards for multiple users at one or more locations. Get a free trial at securityweekly.com/ANSI. That's /ANSI.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Paul Asadorian and Jason Albuquerque. We have exciting news about the Security Weekly webcast program. We are now partnered with ISC Squared as an official CPE provider. If you attend any of our webcasts, you will receive 1 CPE credit per webcast. Register now for our upcoming webcasts with ServiceNow or Core Security, or both of them, by going to securityweekly.com. Click the webcast drop-down and select registration. If you've missed any of our previously recorded webcasts, you can find them in our on-demand library by selecting On Demand from the webcast drop-down. We also have some exciting news about our programming. Starting this quarter, Security Weekly is starting a new podcast called Security and Compliance Weekly, which will focus on the integration of security and compliance. Jeff Mann is hosting this new show. Also in this quarter, we're going to restart Tradecraft Security Weekly. Tyler Robinson will be bringing us new tips and techniques for penetration testing. Look for both of these shows later this month as we start to get those published. We have episode number 3 for Security and Compliance Weekly tomorrow, actually. And then we'll start getting ready to release those.
Very exciting.
Yes.
That's awesome.
All right. So let's get into some articles. Some interesting articles this week. A lot of CIO articles that can also be applied to CISOs, which I thought was really interesting, which is why I brought them in, Jason. But before we get into a couple of those, the first one I brought up, the 2 big reasons that digital transformation fails, right? We've all heard this digital transformation. It's the future of where business is going, but some of these projects are failing. We're spending a lot of money. The number in this article is we spent $100 billion between 2016 and 2018, but we're not getting that same return on our investment. So the question is why?
No, this is a great article, and it takes us back in time to the days where the CIOs were struggling with adoption rates for technologies, right? I mean, we saw similar numbers back in the day when we'd invest in the technology and then we'd adopt 20% of it, and that return on investment would be down the toilet. So I look at this as the modern day adoption rate scenario, right, where we're not getting success out of these very expensive projects. And there's very prescriptive reasons as to why, right? And some of them align with that whole adoption rate, challenge that we had. So, I mean, one of them was unspoken disagreement among top managers about goals. I mean, that's something that, 10 years ago, we were having conversations around business units and, everybody's gung-ho for this technology, but some people wouldn't bring the issues up to the table and have the right discussions, right? And I say this is an exercise in emotional intelligence, right? Be able to have those conversations. If you're seeing folks within, in meetings about, these IT initiatives or security initiatives, and you see that they're not, they're uncomfortable or they're not speaking up, have some sidebar conversations because they may not be comfortable, airing all the issues that they have out in front of a group of people, right? So you can be supportive in that because ultimately your job as a leader is to get these initiatives to be successful for the organization, get that return on investment. In this article they talk about returns on digital investment, but it's the same idea, same concept. ultimately as a leader, you're responsible for helping that become successful.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this boils down to communication. Back to the last segment, right? Is we see these projects, and if we have disagreement, it's a communication challenge, right? It's let's get those issues out on the table. Let's talk about it and figure out how to move these projects forward. And what you're seeing is if you get disagreement, they're not bringing it up, so you're not resolving the issues, and then you have kind of this infighting going on where these projects are doomed to fail, let alone all the other technical aspects of, a pilot to scale. I mean, think about just, how some of this stuff has to scale out, which is the second point in this article. But I think it just boils down to that basic communication. The leaders need to align goals.
Yeah, and it's from every party, right? I mean, I would have more respect for the debate if it was out on the table in front of everyone, and we could have, healthy debate on how to get to that outcome for the business, right? But when it's happening behind closed doors or in sidebar conversations and not really out there for everyone to be able to look at, evaluate, and make good business decisions, it's a disservice to the organization.
Yeah, I think to bring Santa Arcangelo moment into the show, right? I think a lot of what we're talking about right now is defining the problem. What problem are we trying to solve, right? And a project that gets labeled as digital transformation needs a problem to solve,
right?
And that's why, Matt, you talk about projects failing. It's because they fail to define the problem they're trying to solve and align that to the business, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why, I mean, we can call it whatever. I've seen it called so many different things over the years, right? Oh, you need a slider on your website. You need a mobile app. You need this, you need that. But if you look at the business and your customers, especially, what problem are we trying to solve here? We've done some things like that before that haven't worked out so well. But when we listen to our audience and our customers and we define the problem, yeah, maybe some new technology is the answer, and we do need to transform aspects of the business. I think some of the mistakes people make, like we need to do digital transformation and transform everything. No, you need to prioritize. You need to prioritize and execute. Create a prioritized list. What's going to benefit your customers, your employees the most, and then technology may be part of it. How big a part of that is really going to be defined on the problem and the solution and the outcomes, potential outcomes.
And if you identify the problem and you scope it correctly, now you can set realistic goals to achieving those as part of that project so that it doesn't fail, that you can actually meet those goals and then roll that proof of concept into production or whatever, right? It's that alignment of problem, solution, set of goals, and articulate and roll that out, I think is a big part of this.
Sometimes it can work the other way, and a lot of times I think that the culture and the people have already defined the problem and define it the same way, and that makes for a very easy digital transformation. Like let's, as an example, payroll. Maybe you're doing your own payroll and you've got those ancient printers in there, right? And everyone in the company's like, God, we hate doing that. Like it's awful. We hate processing checks. We just hate, we're doing it. And when you come along and say, we got this great technology, everyone's like, yeah, like we're all on board. Like let's create a plan and let's do it, right? Those are oftentimes the most successful projects. So you take that big pain point for your customers or your employees, the ones that are just like, it's out in the open. Everyone knows it. Maybe there hasn't been a good technical solution. And then you can put one together and everyone's on board, which is not always the case. I mean, that's kind of utopia that everyone's on board, right? There's always the, what was it? What was the book with the mice? Where there's always
Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah, Who Moved My Cheese, right? There's always that, what was the name of the curmudgeon-y one that didn't want to change, right? But there was always that one, one person at least, I think. But
Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah, I mean, in that scenario, you have predetermined skin in the game because the business wants it. The difficult ones are when you as a CIO or a CISO or a technology leader within the organization, you identify operational efficiencies or ways that you can help the organization, move to that next level. And you're getting, the parochial set of folks who are like, I don't want to change anything I'm doing. I like the way it is, right? It's that's when you need to have that proactive conversation with the business, proactive conversation with leaders across the organization, and really build that case of how this is going to help you and help us succeed, and really transform the business.
Yeah, you talked about prioritization, which leads into my second article, which is how to know what to prioritize at work. And again, prioritization is part of this, right? From a digital transformation perspective, you can't bite off the whole thing. So what do you do? So this article talks about 5 strategies to help you focus on the right things, which is a good lead in from the last article. Number 1 was interesting because it says, choose your task proactively. Don't let them choose you. Now that again is utopia because you don't always get to do that either.
That's right.
Right? It's usually a business need or challenge that is, I don't know, maybe that's just because I'm the situation I'm in trying to, write the stats engine. I mean, that chose me, right? I didn't choose it on purpose. I didn't choose it because for 14 or 15 years, I've been struggling with the best way to present, statistics from our show and track that effectively, which in the podcast can be very, very difficult. And that chose me. But I think and I don't know if it's in the list, is having the entire team understand why you're working on what you're working on, right? And most are on board and know that I'm spending a lot of time coding, but the outcome is going to be some saved time at work, certainly some automation to help everyone, right? Our customers are going to have a better experience, so therefore that's where I'm stuck now,
it kind of leads into 3. Choose the tasks that are related to your goals, right?
Yeah, and if everyone's on board with the goals
for the business, right,
yeah.
then you're doing the right thing. I thought number 2 was interesting, though. Pick the tasks that are important, not just urgent, right?
True.
And they put a nice little matrix in there about what's important, not important, urgent, not urgent. And it says pick the tasks that are important, not just urgent, right? Stats is important. There's also level of urgency, but it's more the importance for us to get those stats right and be able to communicate them to our sponsors in an effective way. That's a very important task for us. It's urgent at certain times of the year. It's not urgent all the times, right? At the end of the quarter, everybody wants to know what their stats were. So, urgency is not
I mean, when you put that in the context of a SOC, right? Things that are urgent once a day are probably really important, right? And yes, you're going to have that one big incident per year. If you're lucky, maybe you have, big is up to your interpretation, right? But the things that are urgent once a day, as you know, having worked in a SOC or managed a SOC, those are the things that are probably the most important that maybe you as a manager work on and create a project for, because that's going to save you so much time moving forward and make you more
And that's
efficient.
why a lot of times you take that urgency and get more context, right? So it's impact, urgency, and likelihood. You're putting those 3 things together to make a decision, right?
Yeah. It also said choose tasks that make other things on your to-do list obsolete, faster, or easier, right? Again.
I love this one.
Yeah,
I absolutely love
perfect
this one.
sense. Yeah, because if you're doing something that makes all the other tasks easier to do, why wouldn't you do that one first?
Right.
That's it. It's operational efficiency, right? Work to get your head out of the weeds, out of the day-to-day grind, out of the whirlwind, so you can focus on transforming and growth, right? If you're always focused on the run and you're always focused on keep the lights on, you're never going to be able to focus on transformation.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're working in a SOC, let's say, and you get external reports like something from your organization is doing XYZ, or they went to university, it was a copyright violation. It was exactly this, right? There was and the natural reaction is, oh my God, something came from outside and told us something was bad. Therefore, we need to drop everything, and that's the highest priority. And it was a learned skill over time that basically, back to the prioritize and execute, that we needed to research those and prioritize those accordingly and balance that with all the other work. And it may be that it's something we don't need to respond to. And what level of verification does each one have? Certainly, looking back on it, the answer was not every time we get this from outside, stop everything, drop everything, and go in full-blown instant response mode, right?
Yeah. Now align that with the leadership side when you have a member of a board of directors who comes to you and says, hey, I got this really cool email about this new shiny tool. I think we should go with it.
Yeah,
right? Or,
right.
my brother's cousin owns this company. I want you to check out their tools.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You can't drop everything for things like that.
Yeah, I thought the 5th catch-all bucket was, if all the ones fail above, do what is most uncomfortable first, which I thought was an interesting way to think about it.
Yep.
You know what? I love this one as well. I prescribe to it because the things that are uncomfortable, they're the ones that you don't want to be doing. And you're going to put it off until, it gets too late. So those things that make you uncomfortable, jump on those first.
Kind of like
those
stats.
hard tasks and tackle them.
Like stats.
Like
Yes,
stats.
Exactly right. Poor Paul. Article number 3, DevSecOps model requires security get out of its comfort zone. I think we all know that we talk about this a lot on different shows. If we're going to really get to this concept of DevSecOps, and we talked about this on Application Security Weekly this morning, security's got to get out of its comfort zone a little bit. And this article talks about a couple things here that I thought were interesting. I mean, the first one is, have a light touch, right? You can't be the bull in the china shop coming into dev and dictating this, that, and the other thing, right? Because that strategy is not going to work with the dev team. It just won't, right?
No, it's never worked across the business at all, right? I mean, a traditional brand of security is that we're a roadblock, we're an impediment, we're the department of no, when we're trying to position ourselves to be strategic. So we need to take that approach that we're here to enable the business. We're here to help develop competitive advantage. We're here to align and support the goals of the business. We're here to make the client experience better. So it's a different mindset, right? And we have to kind of rebrand that old negative brand that we have.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think historically, and I was actually thinking about this over the weekend, historically, I think we've looked at the development process and we've looked at where we could potentially implement security. I mean, traditionally, there was only really a couple of areas we could check, right? Like, we could make the code more secure in the left-hand side, right? We could do some better testing in the middle, and there was a checkbox there. And then we could put a WAF in front of it, right, or do something in runtime, and there was like maybe 3 checkboxes. And as long as security back in the day, right, we were doing something with development, something with some kind of testing or scanning, and something with some kind of WAF, we were like, hey, SDLC secure, right? We're off to the races. Now it's different. We've got potentially like a dozen checkboxes, right? But they're not checkboxes anymore. They're lists of checkboxes that we can take this one security item, task, a goal, or something that we want to protect against or prevent or test, right? And we can put maybe in this checkbox and do some linting and code analysis. Maybe we can do some inventory and it helps with that problem there. So we've got a lot more areas where we can apply security in the process and keep things moving in a cycle, not just moving forward, right, by having the feedback loop moving in that cycle. So we've got a lot better, I think, tools and strategies that can sit in all these little different areas, right, and not just be the securities coming in and going, well, you need to write more secure code. Here's a tool. Have a good day and check the box, right?
Right, exactly. Hey, I think it's a good rule of thumb to just look at it as a partnership, right? You're a consultant to the business. You're there to lend your knowledge and your expertise, and you're there to consult and use that partnership to make the business better, that business unit better, whichever one you may be consulting with, but treat it as a partnership.
Yeah, and it talks about doing a risk-based security strategy. To your point, there's potentially 12 different places we can integrate. We may not integrate with all 12 day one. We might say, look, based on the risk of what we're doing, these are the first couple we're going to go after, and we're going to integrate into the process.
And that depends on your maturity model.
Exactly. It's going to depend on maturity and a lot of factors.
I mean, if you claim that they're 100%, we've got a well-defined DevOps process. We've got a completely fully built CI/CD pipeline, right? And we've implemented Agile, to use all the buzz terms, right? It's all a process that we're building. And based on what we've built so far, we may say, look, maybe there's projects that coincide. Development's implementing software inventory control. And again, that's just not one stop in your development cycle anymore. There's multiple places where that can live, right? And multiple options. There's commercial software. There's some free. Maybe you want to use a couple of different solutions for that, right? Runtime container security can be another check, right? Where are you going to put the checks? How are they going to be implemented? And that's just one area, right? And you just got to keep iterating. Then as new things come out, you got to go back into your CI/CD pipeline and figure out where that's going to fit.
Yep.
Yeah, and we talked about it earlier, right? Communication is key because you can take this risk-based approach and have order of priority on how you want to handle things, but make sure you're communicating to the teams who you may not be focusing on right now, right? And explain to them where they are in that roadmap and where they fall on that roadmap, because the last thing you want to do is have them feel neglected. Then we're right in that same place all over again, right? So communication is very important, and especially if you're following this approach.
What I like about that is traditional waterfall development, for example, right? Developers wrote code, and then the next stopgap measure that would break a build was QA, right? Like, depending on your organization, QA had to do some testing, it had to pass some level of validation, right? Maybe the next stopgap measure, maybe it wasn't even a stopgap measure, was security. Like, someone from security had to scan it or test it. Maybe that wasn't even most of the time it wasn't a requirement. It was after it's deployed that you were doing testing, and then asking developers again to stop and go implement the fixes, right? What's nice about the new models and processes is collectively you can decide what you stop for and what you don't, right? And then how long you have to make the fix. I think it's a much better way to make decisions about how and when and where to implement security.
Yeah, and that kind of leads into the third one is have some DevSecOps chops, right? You have to understand how code is being written and built in your organization to really understand how to integrate these things together, which is a communication component, but it's also understanding based on how you build code, how mature your pipeline is. You have to really understand that. And I see developers in a really unique position. Developers, we covered an article this morning from a developer that moved into a security consulting role, right? And his experience, because he understands how code's built, right? And having some of that understanding actually helps you build better security into the pipeline.
Well, and realize you don't just have one pipeline, you have dozens, maybe hundreds, depending on the size of your organization.
Exactly.
So it ends up being this huge matrix, right, of who's going to implement what type of check based on what they're developing and where they are. And look, a lot of this, again, is utopia, right? I mean, a lot of shops today still have legacy code running maybe on a legacy operating system, and they're maintaining it and moving forward. It's a huge project to take those, again, I think it goes back to our digital transformation, right? It's a huge project to take those legacy apps and push them all the way forward where you're even 60, 70% of the way there in building a DevOps style process.
Yeah. I did throw in a podcast. I'm not going to cover it much, but it's a good little podcast, talk about how to get out, how to get outside your comfort zone a little bit. There's three examples in there. I think one is really good for people who have fear of talking in front of people. The first story that they cover in the podcast is, how to prepare to talk to people. I think is a great communication one for anybody who's got to get up and present. But there's a couple others about how to deal with conflict and some other stuff, again, on this communication path. Won't spend a lot of time on that one because there's a couple other articles I want to hit here today. But it's like 27 minutes. Good little listen to for anybody who wants to get some tips there. But I do want to talk about this. These last three are all about the CIO, and they can all they're all applicable to the CISO. Every single one of these, they come out of the CIO side, but all applicable to the CISOs. First one is 3 things CIOs should discuss with the CEO to optimize cybersecurity. Well, if the CIO owns cybersecurity, in some organizations they do, and some it's the CISO, right? Again, I thought a really good article on some of the things that CISOs and the CEO need to be having conversations about. Jason, curious on your thoughts because you report directly to the CEO.
Yeah, no, I mean, the article's dead on, right? I think we talked about this earlier. Number one, you need to sit back and know the culture of your organization, right? So you can be having those business-driven conversations about risk. What does your CEO want to see? What does the board of directors want to see? My organization is going to be different than other organizations. So having that level of communication and saying, what information can I give you that's going to get the business to the outcome? That's what I'm going to build. That's when I'm going to help you, set you up for success and give you your A game when you're talking to the board of directors or we're talking to the board of directors. What are those right metrics? And again, take that consulting role, right? Because, my CEO doesn't want to know how many vulnerabilities, we've been able to remediate over time. But he wants to know how we're keeping our clients safe and what we're doing to do that, right? So it's really about getting the right metrics and being able to communicate that, right? And one of the items in here is business collaboration first. Well, I mean, what better way to start getting the visibility into business collaboration is, number one, aligning with those goals of the board of directors and the CEO, and then working with all of the other business units to achieve that. Right now, you're taking business collaboration because you're aligning to a lot of the other metrics that your peers have to bring to the table.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting the way they phrase it. Business collaboration first, then compliance comes in naturally. A lot of people, right, use the compliance hammer to do some of the other things from a security perspective, but they took a very interesting approach in this article, that collaboration then can lead to a compliance outcome because there is alignment through that business collaboration piece.
Jason, you said something very interesting that the CIO doesn't necessarily care about the number of vulnerabilities. I agree, by the way. Where I think that if I put a temporary CEO hat on, right, of an organization, I'd want to know, I think, what could tie into a lot of things. There are no silver bullets, right? But where I would ask my CIO, where's our most technical debt, right? And then talk about, okay, now how does that relate to the business? I mean, we could have a lot of technical debt in an area of the business that's not critical, probably not a lot of risk there, even through compliance, right? That's not necessarily the only factor, but if you start there and then kind of work your way through, okay, we've got a lot of technical debt here. By the way, we'll fall behind on compliance, and by the way, it's a mission critical app, and by the way, our customers are demanding the next digital asset, mobile app kind of thing. That's I think, a nice path to navigate at a high level. You don't have to talk about number of vulnerabilities and all these technical things, right? It's just really about how you measure technical debt, which sounds easy, but of course it's not.
Oh, it's not. It's not. But you just summarized it all. You're bringing a wealth of context to the table. You're not just saying this legacy system that is, a piece of technical debt to the organization has, 652 vulnerabilities in it. That's not what you're saying. You're taking a bunch of context, putting it together and saying, here is the overall business risk to our organization.
Right.
And here's how it's going to affect us internally. And hey, by the way, our customers as well.
Yeah, exactly right. These next two articles kind of come together. Meet the CIOs of today. Resumes vary, scope widens. Again, I can insert CISO into that same conversation. 100%. Right? Because you live this every day, Jason, right? And then Gartner's article, How to Succeed as a CIO with a Non-IT Background. Because, look, we're seeing people move into these roles that aren't necessarily technical. They're more business folks. We're starting to see more of that business aspect coming in. And I thought these two articles were interesting because they're kind of helping us define what do those future leaders look like in our organizations, and what are some of the things that people are looking for in those roles.
Right. And Matt, the one thing it made me think of was, what are we doing wrong as people who grew up in the technology sector? What are we doing wrong to not be getting these seats at the table? Right. If we're pulling from other lines who have a little bit more business acumen, does that mean our technical folks aren't building their business acumen well enough to be able to hold these roles or jump into these positions? It's just, for me, this is a lesson in, listen, if you're in technology, whether you're a CIO or a CISO, you're at that level and you're not knowing the business, you're going to have a short-lived role. Or if you're a manager director and you're looking to make that jump, you have to learn the business. You have to, right? Because it's showing right here that folks with business acumen are taking these technology-focused roles.
They are. It's constant through here, value creation rather than efficiency, making sure you're collaborating with the business, you leverage your business experience. I mean, these are all things that the executive, the board, the CEOs are looking for in these roles, and really helping guide how these roles are going to continue to evolve over time. And I thought these were just two great articles, not only for the CIOs, like I said, they're named CIOs, but these are the same learning aspects as CISOs we also need to take into account as well.
100%. These two articles are great, especially for the aspiring technology leaders, right? If you want to be jumping into this, take a look at these two articles. It's some good advice on the things you should be focusing on to be able to get that seat at the table and have the right conversation with leadership, to have the right strategic conversations even with your clients, right? Because, if you're in a B2B side of the house and you're having conversations with your customers, they're struggling with these same things. So, take a look at these articles. It's going to help you mature, help you have that better business acumen, because we need more of that, right? In this industry, from a CISO perspective, we need the good security-focused folks to start focusing on leadership and focusing on learning the business, so that way we have that seat at the table.
I think to be an extraordinary CIO without an IT background, you have to have a number of different qualities. I think there's probably lesser of these types of people because of the qualities I think you need. I think a lot of us learn empathy in an IT setting as a manager because we've been there, right? We've been in the trenches, so it comes natural. If you don't have that background, I think two things. One, you got to have a lot of empathy. Number two, you have to be a really good listener over the years to understand why can't this project move faster, and have outstanding technical people on your team that can explain it to you so you gain that knowledge without having necessarily had that role. And there's a smaller, I think, subset of people that have those, kind of, well, almost like one and the same kind of skill, right? Part of empathy is listening. But I think that's what really, if I look back on my career, the folks I worked with that didn't have a technical background that were awesome to work for, right? They had those qualities.
Yeah, sure, but they also surrounded themselves with the best of the best, right?
And that's a quality in of itself. Yes.
Yep.
Certainly.
Yeah. I mean, you're gonna struggle on both sides, right? So if you're a technologist trying to earn your chops up the way through business leadership, you're gonna have to focus on the business and learning the business and get your business acumen. If you're, if you came from the business side of the house and you have very strong business acumen, you're going to have to get your chops up on the technical side, right? Because you have to have those relationships with your teams and some level of, respect from the team as well, right? I mean, it's, you have to be able to influence your team, right? So you have to show that you want to be involved in learning the technology side.
Yeah, because you got to build the trust on both sides. You got to build the trust with the business, and you got to build the trust with the technical side of the house. You have to build those trust relationships.
Yep.
Yeah, agreed. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.